right, let's now turn our attention to our top focus at this hour. The IndiGo CEO, Ronojoy Datta, has said that the airline will conduct an internal study on how to better handle distressed, specially abled passengers. This comes after IndiGo came under fire and was fined 5 lakh rupees by the aviation regulator DGCA for not allowing the boarding of a specially abled child who was in panic. IndiGo CEO said that as per DGCA's findings, they will work on how to be more sensitive in calming down distressed passengers. Well, let's bring in some more perspective here. I'm being joined by Captain Amit Singh, founder, Safety Matters Foundation, and Mugdha Karla, founder, Not That Different. Thank you so much for both of you for joining us on the broadcast. Mugdha, let me start with you first. In this specific instance, and now, of course, the fact that IndiGo has decided to conduct an internal study, in your opinion, what is the area which is lacking the most when it comes to dealing with specially abled passengers?
Empathy. Empathy is what is missing. We have always dealt with people with special needs with sympathy. I think now empathy needs to take the forefront. It is very important for people to realize that that neurodiversity is much more rampant and regular now in our everyday life. We are likely to meet more neurodiverse individuals as the numbers are now put at 1 in 7 world over. So a lot of neurodiverse conditions, invisible disabilities and disorders will be at display, will be part of our daily routine and our acquaintance with people. So I guess that is something that is required. And I'm very happy that IndiGo has chosen to take this path where they are not appealing against the DGCA order and are saying that we will course correct. I'm all for learning and unlearning, and we, as parents of children with special needs, take this as a very, very welcome approach.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Captain Amit Singh, in your perspective, how is this really going to make a difference and change this entire process? The fact that IndiGo has voluntarily decided to do this kind of study, although it took this kind of an incident for that to happen, but this should be the norm and rather than the exception.
Well, that is a welcome change from the corporates to do a study. And this can be used as a case study. The last one which was done was in 2012, out of which the regulations have come. The Ashok Kumar committee was made in 2012. There are certain portions I feel were missed out. The more important part is, like my fellow panelists said, I would like to add that it should be altruism. Empathy with altruism, which means selflessness, or rather not without any reward or a benefit. So you offer help to other person. There are ways to do that. In pilot selection that we conduct, there is a part which is called a company fit, a culture fit. So you have to define the company, the corporate culture, and then you match the person who is in the check-in area or dealing with customers, passengers, has to be more driven by altruism rather than from rewards. From the regulation perspective, other regulators like the FAA, the US regulator, is very clear. The international regulators, like not the regulators, but the policymakers, the UN body, and the IATA, called International Association of Travel Companies, of which most of the airlines are a part, they are bending backwards to accommodate people with disabilities, to help them out and facilitate their travel. So we have to understand the spirit of the rule. That spirit is to facilitate people to travel, not to stop them in case you find them or their reactions which you feel may be affecting safety. Now, what the regulator says, or the model regulator, which is the FAA, that you must not refuse to provide transportation to a passenger with disability because the person's disability may result in an appearance or an involuntary behavior that may offend other people or annoy others. So you must not, it is very clear that you must not refuse. You may refuse on the basis of safety, the anchor which IndiGo took, and I'm glad they changed it. But the safety you have to assess. You have to train your people on how to assess if the safety is going to be affected. If you see the numbers, the statistics, can somebody provide me statistics of one flight which has been affected by safety concerning a person with disability? We have had n number of cases of unruly passengers at airports and on the flights. Statistics, about 6.9 unruly passengers per 10,000 departures weekly. So that is what the FAA has reported. And India, we have about 20,000 departures per week. So we should have more number of cases of unruly passengers. So we have unruly passengers. They may amount to people abusing or physically, or even not wearing masks, not complying with the orders or the regulations. Those are unruly passengers. But people with disability do not pose a threat to safety. And the last, what the FAA says that you have to leave it to the last effort. You must make every effort to make it possible for them to travel, and short of refusal to travel. So you must modify your policies, procedures, etc., to enable them to enable them to travel rather than stopping them. That should be the last resort, because they do not.
All right, I think we're having a problem with that line. We'll just try to reconnect with you, Captain Singh. Meanwhile, I'll go across to Mugdha once again. Mugdha, as a parent of a specially able child yourself, in your own experience, how have you seen this entire space sort of in terms of the aviation space specifically, and how they deal with specially able children or people over the last several years? What has been the change that has come in? Of course, there's still some way to go, but what is the change that you've seen?
Honestly speaking, we were putting together a feedback docket, which we have sent already to airlines of more than 70, 80 parents who have shared their feedback with us. And what is most interesting is what is most interesting at the moment is that everybody has said that they have had wonderful experiences with airlines. And it takes only one incident of this kind to put everything in sort of a limelight of a negative kind, right? And but having said that, my son is 12 and he was 10 months old when we started traveling. And for the last 12 years, we've been traveling IndiGo along with other airlines. And we have seen a lot of efforts being made. But yes, he's young at the moment. But when you're dealing with older people, yes, there is a difference between unruly behavior and between a problem behavior that is perhaps coming out of anxiety or sensory processing disorder or autism. So that's the only reason why we are saying, let the parent body come together and help you sensitize your trainers, and then you can take that training ahead to your other staff members. But what is very important at the moment is to understand how to handle the behavior, or how to understand what is happening with an individual, and then perhaps look at the best way forward to be to give that family or that person the opportunity to fly. Yes. Versus, as my co-panelist said, versus stopping them. So the idea is perhaps introduce best practices from the world over. For instance, we have a lanyard system at Glasgow Airport, wherein a child who is wearing a lanyard is it's not saying that I'm autistic or I'm neurodiverse. It's just saying that I'm wearing something which all the airport staff recognizes as a sign of someone who may need special attention, and it's seamlessly. The process is then seamless at security, at check-in, at boarding, everywhere. So some of those great practices, if we can bring in here, I feel it will be a great service to everyone. And I always maintain we are all the same team. You know, we want to support everybody who is part of our daily life, and we want these children to travel. We want these adults to travel, because otherwise, if incidents like these are seen, then parents do not want to take their children and travel. And that, I think, sort of stops us from letting them live their lives to their full capacity.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Very interesting, some of the points that you mentioned about the practices around the world. Captain Singh, do you believe that this is something that can be done independently by each airline, for example, IndiGo carrying out this study, or does it need to be at a larger scale with, you know, the regulator itself looking at this and coming up with the proper protocol, proper regulations, and then ensuring that it is mandated by every airline?
It has to be done collectively. So any rule which is made should be a collaborative effort from all the stakeholders. The majority stakeholders are the passengers. They have to give the feedback ultimately that was the previous rule working or not working, or what sort of modifications are required, because the regulator and the airlines look at it from a different point of view, from their own perspective, but somebody has to give a feedback. The loop does not close without a feedback. So everybody has to pitch in together, because the regulator, in their best judgment, or they might overreact and put in a procedure which is not practical. For example, that the doctor should be present at the point of check-in or something like that. So that is not practical. The person who is handling should be trained to how to facilitate the travel of the passenger. So that is what I pointed out and read out the regulations which are prevalent around the world. India, especially, I read a paper on the privacy laws. India is very nascent. The privacy laws are not developed. So if you want to have a certificate for a disability, then you have to declare a lot of things. So how are these details kept private by the airlines and not divulged? Because the disability can relate to anything from a mental disability to a physical disability. And you have to declare it in the certificate with a photograph, name, address, the type of disability, the extent of disability, to get the privileges,
right,
what come with them. So these things have to be, a lot of psychosocial analytics has to be done. So a regulator may not be in a state to do that. So they have to involve people, the subject matter experts,
yes,
and the international conventions which are prevalent and working. So we might have cultural differences. So that cultural aspect has to be introduced from the Indian perspective, but regulations which are working across and which works during the check-in, security, boarding, and deboarding. So those have to be introduced. So it has to be a collective effort.
Yes, absolutely. Point taken. In fact, Captain and Mugdha, thank you so much for joining us with your perspective on this extremely important issue. Well, on that note, it's time to slip into a very quick break. We'll be back.